and welcome to Frontline Conversations. My name is Abhinav Chakraborty, and today I have Mr. Sanjay Jha with me in the studio. A former banker and internet entrepreneur, Mr. Jha is a political commentator and a former national spokesperson of the Congress Party. He has been a frequent contributor to several mainstream news publications and appears regularly on television panels as a political analyst. He's also the author of books such as The Superstar Syndrome, The Making of a Champion, and 2014, The Great Unraveling. Mr. Jha now has a new book out, and it's called 2024 India in Free Fall. In his latest book, he argues that under Narendra Modi's decade long tenure as Prime Minister, India has seen a crackdown on press freedom, a ruthless evisceration of civil liberties, religious polarization, caste bigotry, institutional debilitation and demagoguery, and an overall democratic downslide. The world's largest democracy, it would seem, is hurtling towards disarray and chaos. Ahead of the upcoming Lok Sabha election, Mr. Jha raises urgent issues pertaining to othering of minorities, civil rights, the state of India's judiciary, and the unfettered growth of crony capitalism, among many other things that make his book a timely and compelling read. I welcome you again, Mr. Jha.
Thank you very much. And I really am grateful for this invitation and looking forward to our conversation, Abhinav.
My first question is regarding the title of your book. The title of the book is rather ominous. What prompted you to write it? Could you tell us about the process of writing it?
I think the credit for the title really goes to my editor and HarperCollins, Swati Chopra, because my initial, title in mind was called Broken. It was a one-word broken, and the subtext was India in free fall. And Swati thought that, let's be more bold because your book is actually talking about many things that are fundamentally wrong with the country. And you don't seem to be too optimistic if this current regime were to get perpetuated over a longer period of time, high risk, but at the same time, highly probable. And she therefore recommended that we go with India in free fall. And so I said, you think we are being extremely, dark and depressing and despondent about India's future? Or should we put a question mark so that at least people know that are we close to the precipice or are we actually hurtling downwards in an irreversible fall? And I think she was right in saying, listen, take a very bold, pragmatic call. The fact remains that there are many things which are anyway crumbling, if not altogether in a dilapidated state. I think stand by what you believe in. And, right now, actually, when I look at some of the developments that have happened over the course of the last couple of weeks, the whole expose and electoral bonds, for example, which tells you that it's not just corruption, but criminality of the highest order with the institutions being abused. Arvind Kejriwal in jail. And, the Indian Congress Party's bank accounts being frozen until they have now been allowed to operate it. Or the fact that the Indian Express expose today that talks about how 25 leaders who joined the BJP since 2014, 23 of them had cases against them that were either put in cold storage or they were acquitted. So I do believe that the India in free fall, title, full credit to my editor once again. And number two, I think it turned out to be prophetic. And somewhere down the line, maybe I should use a bit of Mahabharata and say that, well, Sanjay was always considered to be the man who was very clairvoyant and had foresight. There you go.
In the introduction to your book, you pit two ideas of India against each other, the Nehruvian one versus Modi's New India. You write, were Modi to win a record equaling third term, he would have the opportunity to completely reimagine the country as he deems fit. A metamorphosis of sorts is possible, albeit the metabolism may be ugly. Considering someone like, say, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar recently criticized the tendency, and I'm paraphrasing here, To see the Nehru years with rose tinted glasses, how do you foresee this battle between Nehruvian India and modified India playing out in the near future?
Well, firstly, I'm optimistic and I'm still, an eternally sanguine guy. So I'm hoping that the pushback by the opposition will result in Mr. Modi not getting back into government. A lot of people today have actually fallen to the gaslighting that Mr. Modi has done. We are going to win a hat trick. Watch what we're going to do after the swearing in ceremony. We have already won the elections. I don't think it's inner confidence. I don't think it's even political arrogance. It is basically gaslighting India into believing that, we are winning this game. This is a strategy that is tried very often by a lot of authoritarian to fascist leaders to prey on the susceptible minds of the biggest chunk of voters in societies, those who are undecided, who don't really play favorites, who take decisions, maybe a few hours before they vote. And I think this is an attempt to say, listen, we are winning, so why are you going to waste your vote on an opposition? And I believe that secretly, at least, and publicly, I have been saying so as well, that I think there is a subtle shift happening at the moment, even as we talk. If you look at the crisis that he faces, that despite the Jan 22nd Pran Pratishtha, the consecration of the Ram temple, I believe Narendra Modi thought that the election was done and dusted on that day. But as he's discovered to his very unpleasant surprise, probably, and he's a savvy political character, because remember, he's won most of his elections. So he's got clearly very sharp instincts. I think if you see the response of the government of late, there's a lot of panic here. 600 lawyers writing to the Chief Justice of India, arresting Arvind Kejriwal, freezing Congress's bank accounts on a regular basis, simply sounding extremely insecure. I don't think a person who's winning ever sounds like this. So I'm still going to repeat what I said. I hope Mr. Modi doesn't come back for the third term. In the event that he were to, I do believe that we have a lot to worry about. And there's a simple explanation for it. Imagine if you were the prime minister and you were in his boots. You would say, despite the electoral bonds, where I actually told the Supreme Court that the people of India don't have a right to know who funds political parties, which I thought was like as blasé as you can be. Number two, where I openly harass the opposition. I put authors, intellectuals, writers, the Center of Policy Research, basically hounding think tanks, treating the left as if they were anti-national, treating the Congress as if, they are on the side of Pakistan. Ridiculous conversations. And an economy, by the way, that hasn't delivered. Record unemployment, a demographic dividend story is bankrupt, food inflation is high, there is a lot of corruption, the systems are down, and despite the farmers are out on the streets protesting, and he will tell himself, despite all this, if the public still believes that I'm the man for the moment, they will treat us as a carte blanche to do what they like. And I'm concerned because, we keep talking about Abhinav, about this whole Hindu Rashtra and all that. The truth is, it's already happened. Unofficially, we all know that. We have seen lynching deaths. We have seen religious congregations that have talked about a genocide of Muslims. There is a well-known leader who has mentioned that we want majority because we can amend the constitution. An IPS officer who protests has been branded as a Khalistani. There is a complete collapse overall as the kind of democratic, secular society that we are meant to be. If the BJP wins, Mr. Modi will tell himself, the people of this country are kosher with it. And that is not a good sign, because then they could trample over every institution, whatever is left of it. And frankly, as of now, as we talk, the Supreme Court is probably the last bastion of hope for the country. And you can see that the threats are mounting against each and every surviving institution of India. And next year in 2025, the RSS celebrates its 100 years. I think Mr. Modi will do everything to saffronize this country in ways and means that will make it very difficult thereafter to contain the genie in the bottle.
In the chapter, The Difficulty of Being the Other, you say that the Congress needs to sell its political ideology. As someone who has refused to join any other party despite being expelled by the Congress, you seem well placed to answer this question. What exactly entails this political ideology? And is it a crisis of ideology or leadership in the Congress?
It does worry me. I have mentioned in the book that I remember meeting Yashwant Sinha, who told me that I think Indians have forgotten to protest. I mean, one thing that astonishes me is how the COVID is no longer an electoral issue. I'm surprised because we lived here during COVID, and I remember seeing the second COVID wave, where people were literally asking each other on social media for help, for hospitals, for beds, for oxygen tanks, and what have you. And the government seemed to be literally missing in action. And that headline probably got Outlook into a lot of trouble. But I just feel that we have been brainwashed. I think the role of the big media, as I call the mainstream media, has been significant in keeping Mr. Modi in power mostly undisturbed. Because the average man has been told again and again and again that if Mr. Modi if something is wrong, it's not because Modi is not burning the midnight oil. It's just that he's been unlucky and he's been coping with this once in a lifetime medical crisis. But he's on the right side. Doesn't matter that a few months before India got engulfed in the second wave, he was claiming that the COVID was over, or that India ordered its vaccines much later than it should have. But nobody is even talking about it. The immorality of having your vaccine certificate having the prime minister's face, which no leader in the world did. The fact that we have become so tolerant of such shenanigans tells you that there is something that has affected us all. And I think it's got a lot to do with the personality cult creation, which has been done through a very ingenious collaboration of big media and social media, IT cell of the BJP, is to kind of make all the disasters, and there have been so many disasters, whether it's jobs or economy or private investment, sectarian tensions, Manipur. I need to tell you this. I just can't believe how can we be so chill about the fact that a state in the Northeast, which is very much part of our great country, experiences such a violent ethnic conflict. So much so that people from one community don't have the guts to transgress to the other side. And hundreds over hundreds are dead, and thousands are homeless. And the tensions continue even as we talk. And the prime minister hasn't deemed it appropriate to visit it even once in 10 months. I mean, to me, these are like unbelievable. Would Narasimha Rao have not gone there in the last 10 months? Vajpayee, Dr. Manmohan Singh, Mrs. Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, Pandit Nehru, Lal Bahadur Shastri. I can't believe any prime minister not visiting a state which has seen such an ugly, violent manifestation of a serious conflict. So, these are, somewhere down the line, symptoms of a society that is probably being forced because of fear and self-censorship to kind of lie low. And I do believe that come elections, there is an expression of that angst. But I would have liked to see a lot more of, kind of any democratic situation or society would have faced a huge backlash against it, protest. I'm talking about Gandhi protest. I'm talking about real, criticism on media, societies and civil groups going out there and saying, get justice for the people. But we found it remarkably serene. And I think that's largely because of fear and the threat of political vendetta. A perfect example can be the now called as the BK16, people who are in jail on the most serious charges. And the last I heard, nothing really has happened there in terms of any trial. And Stan Swami, who was 84 years old, struggled to even get a sipper to drink water. I mean, what kind of a country have we become?
In the chapter titled The Rogue Face of Capitalism, which I must admit is one of the better ones in the book, it talks extensively about crony capitalism. Do you think that the lack of a political fallout following the Adani Hindenburg saga, I mean, the market spoke, but there was a lack of political fallout, it raises the question, do these matters or do these issues no longer matter to voters? Or is it the lack of coverage by the mainstream media, particularly TV media, and or the failure of the opposition to build a narrative?
I think it's a combination of all the factors, honestly. I mean, just think about it. Everyone knows that the Prime Minister flew for his swearing in ceremony on an Adani jet. It was like quite a brazen act. No matter you know how they can say that it was just incidental or that the BJP paid for it. There's a lot of messaging involved. Mr. Modi doesn't do anything without a messaging involved. And it's the whole Adani issue. I've been a banker, so I can tell you I know my numbers well. uh, it is obvious as daylight that this is serious issues here, and it required a forensic investigation. There was the issue of money laundering. Um, I think stock price manipulation, SEBI, etc., are investigating it. The more damning thing was the ownership abroad in tax havens by people who could be using a very dubious source of funds. And how did one company suddenly get these contracts? Was it really fair? Was it really transparent? I couldn't believe it, Abhinav, when I saw the numbers, I think for 2022, that the stock market growth during the entire year, 80% of that was because of Adani Group stocks. I mean, do you need to be a genius to know that this is pretty much a mess, a mammoth, monumental mess? And it had to do with the government's intervention. The airports, for example, the Mumbai airport case, which I've written in detail in the book. So I do believe that, I think Rahul Gandhi did his best, frankly. He even ended up being disenfranchised. But I think the other opposition parties were good, but I think all of them had to do a little more. But, at the end of the day, the market sent out a message. I believe Mr. Adani's stocks have since gone up. But, this is not the end of the story. And I want to remind you, including Rafael. A lot of people don't ask this question, but Rafael, a contract was being given to an industrialist who was bankrupt. And if we are talking about Rafael jets, that's about national security. And one of the people who was going to be part of the offsets was financially bankrupt. And who was being denied that opportunity? The Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. So, I do believe these were not, such complicated as Sherlock Holmes was not needed to crack the code here. It was as obvious as daylight. But once again, I keep saying that I think barring a few, I would say people in the print medium, and I would feel that your group is one of them, including the Indian Express and a few others, most have been mealy-mouthed. And I think television channels broadly have killed the conversation. So the opposition tried. I think the media didn't do justice to it. Or even though they covered it, they were battling more for, on the side of the government. And since it was a complicated case of, the financial world is a little technical in the eyes of the common man, they kind of believe that if it was the case, let it roll and let's see where it goes. I think we haven't seen the end of it, but a crucial time has been lost. And Mr. Modi might just kind of get away in terms of an electoral damage that he would have faced on the Adani issue. But I am going to tell you this with full responsibility. As and when the Adani case is frankly fully investigated, it's going to be a can of worms.
Coming to electoral bonds, what do you make of the findings following the revelations? Do you think the fact that the BJP benefited the most from this opaque means of political funding and the allegations of quid pro quos between the government and corporates will be a talking point in the upcoming Lok Sabha election?
I think it has become, and fortunately, because the Supreme Court intervened. I think the matter has now caught the public imagination. The point is that, given the fact that everyone has a short attention span time, I think it's important for the opposition to not be complacent on the subject. Now, take the Arvind Kejriwal case as one example. There are hundreds of them. As a one example, he's arrested, but he's arrested on the same Delhi liquor scam where the earlier offender, apparently the kingpin of the scam, gives 55 crores to the BJP, turns approver. ED has no problem with the bail. It's absolutely mafioso style. It's underworld. We are like what we call in politics the hafta vasuli style of politics. And there's it's done with impunity. There is like contempt for the collective intelligence of the country. It's extremely disconcerting, in my opinion. And there are too many cases now, right, where people have either been threatened with some kind of an arrest and they have coughed up money and then got a bail, or the cases have been closed, or there are people who have actually contributed money and got large contracts. So what you're seeing in electoral bonds is exactly what I think, in a nutshell, tells you why the BJP ought to be defeated in this election. Criminality, corruption, and crony capitalism. And I think where crony capitalism is concerned, we have to also look at some sectors which are held by monopolies now. Why are there only few players in telecom? That needs to be investigated. Why isn't there more competition? Why is there not more competition, for example, in airlines? I mean, these are significant questions to be asked. For example, I would even add all the NPAs that were written off, over 14.5 lakh crores. Can we investigate that? Can we also investigate why many of these distressed assets have been bought? Have they been done at fair valuation? Who's taken the haircut and why? Has the banking sector lost? I mean, look at the issue on Patanjali that is being discussed today in the Supreme Court. The government of India kept quiet when Patanjali was going all over town saying they had a cure for COVID. And we all know that Patanjali has also done a lot of business acquisitions during this period. I think there is a lot to really kind of investigate in this country, because I think this government has been, in my opinion, not just authoritarian, it has been very divisive, and it has probably completely subjugated India's institutions and made them instruments of political exploitation.
There is an underlying argument or presumption in your book that economic considerations still dictate voter choices in India today. But don't you think there has been a paradigm shift in how Indian voters choose whom to vote for, such as that they are influenced now more by socio-cultural factors than merely economic ones?
I have said so in the book. And one of the reasons why I remember telling people within the Congress as well, quite candidly, that, why is it that despite such a serious jobs issue, like, for example, in an American presidential election or the UK parliamentary elections, if jobs is an issue and the government is responsible, they'll be voted out of power. There's no conversation. I mean, Mr. Modi can do what he likes. If it was pure economics, he had no chance of winning this election at all, because jobs are not there. Inflation is high. The real wages of the people who are working in the agricultural sector and marginal farmers or agricultural labor or the unorganized sector has seen no change in real wages for 10 years. Can you imagine that? Manrega wages are not being paid. I mean, the GDP growth rate over the last 5 years is just 4.1% between 2019 until now. Between 2014 till now, the GDP growth is 5.9%. And yet you find Mr. Modi believes he's winning the election, which is the crux to answering your question. That, you see, for him, and that is what the election results are telling you of late, he can obliterate or he can completely obfuscate the challenges that affect the common man by selling the cocktail of hyper nationalism, or what some people call as muscular nationalism. I'm the one who can keep this country safe and secure and bring a certain pride to India, which again, as we all know, is all humbug. And the second point is Hindutva, where he provides this, dose of, shall we say, comfort to people who are struggling at the periphery, to say, I'm invoking in you your cultural purity and recorrecting some historical kind of fault lines and restoring your pristine glory back. You see, this is nothing but rhetoric. It's all a packaging of hyperbole. And what is the purpose? To try and make you forget that you are actually maybe part of the 57% of India that gets 5 kilograms of food grains free for the next 5 years, because he believes your fortunes are not going to change. Right? Remember, politicians love to keep people very often not developing or becoming upwardly economically mobile, because that way you need the state. And the state can come and tell you, why you should vote for me? Because now I gave you a cylinder. I brought some electricity, more number of hours in your home. And, I gave you food grains. But, I have a problem with this argument, Abhinav, which I think the opposition hasn't been able to articulate. If you're in government, what are you supposed to do otherwise? Just provide contracts to Adani. Just give monopolies to the Ambanis of the world. I mean, for God's sake, you can, give defense contracts to some people who visit Davos regularly, or favor a Vedanta, or, sell an airlines to the Tatas. I mean, there are fundamental issues here. That if you're a government where the GDP is around 300 lakh crores, and your annual government expenditure on a budget is around 50 lakh crores, how is it a big deal if you're providing cylinders, which is, by the way, just 2 or 3 max? How is it that if you're providing roads and electricity, how is that the big talking point? I mean, after all, direct benefits transfer, Aadhaar, Manrega, food security was there since the Congress's time, right to education, everything was there before. So for a government to say that I'm actually doing good to the people by providing them this, when actually he's robbing Peter to pay Paul. And the Paul is, by the way, the one who's in Davos. It's Paul who's actually winning the airports. It's Paul who's getting the large oil fields or the coal fields or the forests or the water or the spectrum. I mean, that is one of the biggest cons. So the reason why he gets away with it, and that's your question is absolutely on the dot, is because these issues get camouflaged, because people just feel that here is a man who's providing me my cultural, shall we say, protection by painting somebody else as the villain, and by making me feel that, he's the true nationalist and he's the only one who understands the true contours of India.
You've written about how Rahul Gandhi has belatedly bitten the bullet on the Hinduism versus Hindutva debate. Uh, but the Congress has been accused of doing somersaults from soft Hindutva to taking a strident anti RSS stand. At one point, they called, Rahul Gandhi called himself a Shiv Bhakt, and the party identified him as a Janevdhari. And then the party goes on to decline the Ram Temple inauguration invite earlier this year. So, do you think that the Congress is doing enough to build an alternative cultural narrative vis-a-vis the BJP? Or is it still confused as to how it can counter Hindutva?
I believe the Congress had to do much better than what it has done. It has ceded the ideological space to the BJP on the matter of what I call as a syncretic India. Secularism is in the Constitution. It's in our preamble. The Congress party had to defend it very aggressively. You can't be an apologist for secularism. I mean, listen to Nehru's speeches or Gandhi's speeches. They were all true secularists. I mean, you listen to Sardar Patel, whom the BJP tries to appropriate. These are all secular people. Now, here is the problem. The problem with the Congress was that I think, or is to a great extent even today, is that you're talking in folk tongue. There is Rahul Gandhi, who I think has really taken on the RSS and the BJP very strongly on the issue of secularism. But this fight back has to be more institutionalized. I think everybody in the Congress had to go and tell the people that the term Hindutva is a 1923 creation of Vinayak Savarkar, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar. Hinduism is centuries old. And Hinduism, by the way, is a very eclectic, all-encompassing, inclusive religion. It's a wonderful religion. I'm a Hindu and I'm very proud of it. But to allow the BJP to kind of become the custodian of Hinduism, politically speaking at least, I think the Congress ceded that space for no reason. I mean, you have to be out there speaking very confidently. In fact, when they try to appropriate even Swami Vivekanand, the Congress should have gone with a strong rebuttal of what he really said in that Chicago speech of this. I mean, anybody who's heard his Chicago speech will know that BJP is doing cherry picking to try and appropriate Swami Vivekananda and Sardar Patel and many other people. So here's the point. You need to fight it. And I always recommend it to the Congress that you can't be an apologist if you're a secularist. We allowed people like L.K. Advani to mock it by saying pseudo-secular. I've written that in the book. And, frankly speaking, one had to bite the bullet and tell people that, listen, this country is secular and I'm going to wear that badge. Just because, the Congress had to go and tell people, you think I won 10 of the 17 elections and governed India for 55 years only on 14% Muslim votes? It's ridiculous, right? Look at the mathematics, frankly, Abhinav. If you and I are two political parties, okay, and I am the one playing the communal game and you are the one who's playing the secular game, can you mathematically win an election if you're focusing on minority vote bank of 14%? The biggest vote bank is 80%. So the Congress had to have this conversation. It has not done it exhaustively enough. It has done it in fits and bursts and very sporadically. And think about the other part. The Congress has the Sachar Committee report, which told you as to the extent to which the minority appeasement was just another term that the BJP has used politically to make the Congress feel that they were playing vote bank politics. But if, frankly, the Muslims were well off, they would be doing better economically and socially in jobs, in government and private sector, etc. So I feel that the Congress's mealy-mouthed, weak-kneed, lackadaisical, flip-flop approach has only helped BJP paint it further in the corner, which is so unfortunate because a large part of India is so susceptible to propaganda.
You talk about the coterie around Rahul Gandhi and how they are obdurate gatekeepers. These are your words. Who control who gets to talk to him or who doesn't. But one might argue that why just blame this coterie when none of its members, contest elections or decide who receives the party ticket. In fact, it's the party's old guard, such as the late Veerbhadra Singh, Ashok Gehlot, or Bhupinder Singh Hooda, who have always called the shots, whereas Rahul's picks, such as say Ashok Tanwar, who has since then joined the BJP, and even Ashok Pilot, among others, who have had to wait.
I personally feel that every leader likes to work with a team they're comfortable with. You can't have 100 people that you can work with because it's normal for a political leader to have a few people that you actually have the highest level of confidence in, and hopefully they give you the feedback that you want to know. That is, I think, is a privilege in politics that Rahul Gandhi or any leader deserves. I think the problem in the Congress coterie, if I can use that term, is that they blocked Rahul from meeting people. And I think that is something that you have to make sure that your leader meets people from different walks of life. I'll give you an example. All these people who have left the Congress, if they had got an audience with Rahul, I think probably none of them would have left. Because they actually, none of them disliked Rahul at all. They had a problem with the leadership style, maybe, and to some extent, their own career paths. But largely because they were struggling to get being listened to. And I think when you're not listened to, you feel you're being disrespected. Or you feel that your leader thinks that you're a third shoe or a fifth wheel. Technically, you're being deemed as irrelevant or a political nobody. And I think that's where people leave. Jyotiraditya Scindia, a lot of people criticize him today from the Congress But I've seen him at close quarters, and he was like, when he was in the Congress, there could not be a more passionate fighter. The same could be said about Jitin Prasad or my good friend Milind Devra. So, at the end of the day, when you lose people, you need to know how to stop them. And I think the people around Rahul, I'm not going to take any names. You're right. Most of them are non-political, but therefore they have an even bigger responsibility. Be the eyes and ears, facilitate a conversation. In my previous book, The Great Unraveling India After 2014, I wrote about my own experience. Once upon a time, I had, more access to Rahul Gandhi than many people had when he came to power in 2004. And I saw myself becoming ostracized because I was landing up in Delhi for a meeting, all prearranged, and nothing would happen. So, I think that's where the problem is. I'm not saying that the intent was to make Rahul or the Congress weak, but clearly their methods haven't worked. And I think they have a responsibility today. If leaders, both senior and young, whether it's a Ghulam Nabi Azad or a Kapil Sibal who doesn't get a voice with Rahul Gandhi, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, Kapil Sibal is brilliant by any stretch of imagination. He's fought the case for the Congress party in the National Herald case. He's an eminent lawyer, a brilliant speaker, and he doesn't get an audience with Rahul. Doesn't make any sense at all. So then I tell myself, hang on, I mean, was I being too optimistic in getting to meet him 5 times a year or 6 times a year? And the fact that in his early years, I must have met him a dozen times a year. So, I do believe that these were errors. And that's where the coterie, whoever is the coterie, I'm not saying there's anything wrong in being part of a close-knit team, but the coterie should not become a caucus that actually becomes detrimental for your leader and the party.
Talking about the Bharat Jodo Yatra and the subsequent Bharat Jodo Nyaya Yatra, what do you feel has been the impact of the Bharat Jodo Yatra on voters? And also, what do you think of the timing of the subsequent yatra, which is the Bharat Jodo Nyaya Yatra, especially with election 2024 on the horizon? Do you think of it as a good idea, or do you agree with this being a case of misplaced priorities where a general deserted his troops ahead of battle?
No, I don't agree with that. I think both the yatras have been remarkably successful. The first, obviously, more because it was unique. It was an outlier event. It was Kanyakumari to Kashmir, which features in all the songs. So it was meant to be a blockbuster. I think Rahul was simply phenomenal. And it not only enhanced the Congress's reputation, it also helped his political brand. Even the second yatra, a lot of people criticized it because, the India alliance had serious fractures during that period. But I think the timing was fantastic because it effectively is an election campaign. He was in the news every day from January till March end. And I think it went through several states and constituencies. And more importantly, I think it made, I think Rahul probably, I'm sure he's benefited from this enormously, to look at the issues that confront India, the real issues that confront India that probably don't make the front page news. Secondly, I think the people kind of have realized, right, that here is a man who's willing to work so hard, easily always targeted by the BJP for going abroad, etc., etc. I think Rahul demonstrated here that he was in the game, skin in the game, and he was doing things that no politician has done in India before. I think he's created definitely an extraordinary record. The only politician, I think, in the country or in the world who's traveled the length and the breadth of his country, and India is a large one. So that's a Herculean achievement. And will it deliver in terms of elections? There are two answers to that. Short term, we'll have to wait and see. Long term, it's definitely a winner because I can already see that the Congress cadres are very galvanized. Now it's a question of how you tie up the loose ends.
In the chapter, The Difficulty of Being the Other, you say that the Congress needs to sell its political ideology. As someone who has refused to join any other party despite being expelled by the Congress, you seem well placed to answer this question. What exactly entails this political ideology? And is it a crisis of ideology or leadership in the Congress?
Let me take your last question first. It is a question of ideological clarity, for sure. You should know what you stand for. Once you believe in it, go for it, hammer and tongs, the whole 9 yards. I wanted Congress party to wear the secular badge and say, I'm proud to be a secular party. I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm going to go to a temple. I'm going to go to a mosque. I'm going to go to a synagogue. I'm going to go to a gurudwara. I'm going to go to a Jain temple. I'll do whatever it takes. This is India. I mean, can you change that? Just because Narendra Modi and the BJP play this Hindu Hriday Samrat story, but that's not India, right? India is a larger, multicultural, multi-plural nation. So why not just say it with pride? On the leadership, I'm very clear that end of day, it helps if people know who's going to be holding the baton at the last fag end of the race. And if, Congress had a chance actually that, either you, when some people suggested Mr. Kharge's name, to say, let's go ahead with Mr. Kharge. Since there has been a lot of criticism of the Gandhi dynasty, no harm in Rahul taking a backseat. The idea is to get the Congress back in government, not to worry about who's going to be the prime minister. I think Rahul is a wonderful guy. But if for the moment you have to take the backseat, do it. It's no big deal. The idea is to win the government back so that you can restore really a secular democratic republic back into shape. Your question was on the fact of, the difficulty of being the other, wearing your ideology on your sleeve. In my opinion, the critical part for the Congress here is to go out there and become really the idea of India. Why I believe the Congress really stands for it is because the Congress is truly secular. No matter how much it's accused of minority appeasement, it is truly secular in character. You'll hear an odd speech. You'll hear some kind of, kind of a statement that will appear to be, playing at both sides, but it's never easy to be a centrist party. And I believe Congress's ideology is the idea of India. Being liberal, being progressive. The Congress was the first amongst the political parties to say that the criminality of homosexuality should be removed. There is no need to worry about the repercussion on XYZ. You've got to balance your politics. So there are things you've got to take a stance on. India is not an either or country. So I can say we should abolish Section 377 and still understand that we are a traditional conservative country where religious affiliations have to be respected. Right? So I think Congress's ideology, just to answer your question in a nutshell, is a true idea of India. And therefore, I want, and I still hope, that it is able to sell this idea to the people of this country, that my definition of this country or our definition of this country is what India needs. There may be gaps between the execution of the larger philosophy, but that doesn't change the intent of what you stand for.
On the question of leadership, it's been over a year since Mallikarjun Kharge became the Congress party president following intra-party elections, something that you had recommended in your book. How do you think he's fared so far? Will he be able to revive the organization and leave a mark on the party? And are the days of the Nehru-Gandhi family over?
I don't think I don't think the days of the Gandhi family are over, because in the Congress, they are integral to the entire Congress history. I've been in the party for a long time, and I believe the Gandhis are loved, revered, respected, and idolized. And I have also, when I went to the southern part of India during my political travels, I felt they were loved in Tamil Nadu, in Kerala. And, there was a different affinity there. And I was like overwhelmed with the love that they have. So I think, hats off to them for that. I also want to make a point here, Abhinav, it's important to say that both Rahul and Priyanka Gandhi have never been appreciated or admired enough for forgiving the killers of their parents. And I do believe that showed a great, compassionate, and a very tolerant and forgiving side to people who were children when the entire dastardly assassination happened. But it also shows to you that they are very, very good people. And on the Congress, on Mr. Kharge's side, I think he's surprised people with the way he's handled problems. I thought the troubleshooting between Gehlot and Sachin Pilot, he did it very well. Unfortunately, the Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan setbacks may not have delighted him like Karnataka did. But the only problem is the perception of image that Rahul is still calling the shots from behind. That's something that Mr. Kharge needs to address. But in his public addresses to the people at large or dealing with media, I think he's been right out there. And I think Mr. Kharge has just proven that, in politics, age is like wine. The older you get, the better you get.
At the time of writing the book, you spoke approvingly of the formation of the India bloc and Rahul Gandhi's espousal of the caste census as a trump card to counter the BJP's Hindutva centric politics. Since then, the Congress has gone on to lose the assembly elections in three states across the Hindi heartland in November December 2023. And Nitish Kumar has switched allegiances back to the BJP led NDA. Has the Congress, which is a centrist party, taken a huge risk in taking up a highly polarizing issue like the caste census? I'm asking this as North Indian states such as Uttar Pradesh and Bihar have strong caste leaders from regional parties such as the Samajwadi Party and the RJD, which are both part of the India bloc. And it does not have much of a traction in other states. Will the caste census be a decisive factor in the upcoming Lok Sabha election? And what does it mean for the India bloc's chances?
I feel that the caste census, is not the reason why they lost Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, or Rajasthan. They lost it for other reasons. And therefore, the caste census became a casualty. The truth is that now, it takes time, right, to tell people why do you need a caste census? What does it mean in terms of identifying the economic parameters or the social parameters that the census will probably reveal in terms of your income level, your job, where are you actually benefiting compared to what is your your proportion in the total population of the country. So, this is basically because the economy has struggled for the last 10 years. So the role of the state or the public sector or the government or educational institutions has become very critical, which is why reservations is not going to be a non-issue for a long time. It is going to be a very critical aspect of all political parties. So I think the Congress has since, if you look at it, actually doubled down on the caste census. So realistically, Rahul has said, I'm going ahead with the caste census because OBC, Dalits, and the Adivasis have probably been at the receiving end of the entire India growth story, which maybe the people who eat avocado on toast and wine and cheese and are probably ordering cheese souffles on their Swiggy and Zomato will never understand. But that's the reality of an India that you just cannot ignore. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is that, at the end of the day, if you look at probably going forward, in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and most of these heartland states, caste is an instrumental factor. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, Mandal became what it did. But I think the reason why it's becoming more politically a challenge for the BJP, because they are playing a very hard Hindutva, campaign. So they will feel extremely insecure because if the average Indian citizen begins to look at his life beyond one cylinder and 5 kilos of food grains, they will realize, hang on, he might have done this for me, but for the other guy, he gave the airports. To the other people, he's gone ahead and given coal mines. To the other people, he's sold airplane companies. To the others, he's given them tunnels. And he's made them, build ports and bridges. So there is a big story here. And I think the Congress and the opposition is taking, this is the boldness that you require in politics. I believe in politics, you can't be squeamish. You can't be pussyfooting around. You take a call, where do you stand? And I'll tell you what you asked me earlier in this question about being the only guy who hasn't switched sides. And I'm saying so on your program. I'm ideologically a Gandhian Nehru believer. I believe India needs that combination of Gandhi's ideology and philosophy and his satyagraha and his non-violence, combined with Nehru's secular, democratic, liberal, progressive construct for India. And then, when you fight for the downtrodden, I think that is the model that I believe in. So, for me, the question of going to another party just doesn't arise. The Congress hasn't expelled me, suspended me. So we are in that very, what I call is a live-in relationship. We have some turbulence, but, frankly, as I jokingly said somewhere, live-in relationships are often more passionate than marriages. So, at the end of the day, I feel that we live in a world where we got to realize that it's amorphous. In life, when it comes to philosophy, ideology, and ethics, you should live in a black and white zone. But when it comes to the larger complexity of Indian polity, you have to manage the gray. I think the Congress needs to discover this dichotomy a little better.
You touch upon this aspect just a bit in your book. You talk about polarization affecting relations within families and friends. So, how do Indians navigate this vituperative, vicious atmosphere? What is the way forward?
Oh, well, let me tell you, this is very rocky terrain. I've seen families being split on the dining table. I'll share with you my own personal example. My own elder brother, who lives in New York, he's one of the biggest bhakts of Mr. Modi. He's probably more ardent fan of the RSS than maybe some people who even go to the shakas here in Nagpur. So, it all happens, I guess. We all have a right to have our own independent thought, and I personally feel you got to find the reality of accepting that you coexist with these ideological differences. It's not easy, though, I need to point out, because very often when we find that if you are the BJP supporter is appalled at how somebody can love the Congress and the Gandhis, etc. And anybody who's in the Congress is aghast at how can somebody ever be part of the RSS or the Bajrang Dal or the VHP, etc. And I think they're entitled to have their separate opinion. I think the problem under Mr. Modi over the last 10 years is not the polarization, it's a hate that is coming. You can have different opinions, like Republicans and Democrats are polarized. But when there is violence, it changes the story. When there's threat, when there's fear, when there is reprisal, when there is retribution, I think that changes the whole conversation. And then it becomes abusive. And then it becomes deeply personal. Soon it becomes visceral. So I can tell you, for example, that my wife and I are both hard believers in the more liberal secular ideology. If we want, I'll be very honest, I would wonder how we would be compatible. And I'm sure this is a question that a lot of people ask themselves, that question. So I think at the end of the day, I think these are the issues that I think we need to be real about. And part of that has happened because over the last 10 years, we have been told what to wear. And actually, they have come to your dining table in your room. And if you watch a 9 o'clock news on television, it's in your drawing room or your bedroom, and it's talking to you a language of a blood fest, whichever side you're on. And that's where I think it's become, I would say, extremely disturbingly.
And in my final question, I'm talking about the chapter India, the Moment of Truth. You write, Modi may still be remembered as the man in whose tenure the Ram temple was built, but for Ram Rajya, India will have to wait for another prime minister. What do you think is Narendra Modi's legacy as prime minister?
I believe, I think when I wrote that line, I felt very good that I wrote that line. When I wrote that line, I knew the Ram temple consecration temple was around, but my book had already been wrapped up at that time. And I said, Mr. Modi, although it's a Supreme Court verdict that has led to the Ram temple, the BJP would try and, make political capital out of it. And I said, if you look at Bhagwan Ram, Bhagwan Ram was someone who believed in forsaking power. He in fact gave away power and went to the jungles, right? So it's a complete contrast to the political party that tries to champion his cause. I mean, it's actually ridiculous that there is you're taking one of the most significant icons of of our lives in the Hindu religion and actually not doing justice to what he really stood for. But I believe Ram Rajya, as the way Gandhi ji espoused it, will only happen when you have a government or a political party that is truly, genuinely from its heart, indifferent to where people stand in the caste hierarchy, or which temple or which mosque do they pray in. End of day, I think humanity is far bigger and far more, I would say, you know, universal, as opposed to the little parochial politics that we do with in our home grounds. And therefore, I remain a big believer that give it time, maybe even in 2024, we might we might just witness a most surprising result.
That's all from our side, Mr. Jha. Thank you so much for talking to Frontline.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure. I think we spent almost an hour. I didn't know how time flew by.